Hello, this is your host Akhil Navluri, and welcome to the brand new episode of the Techospace podcast series. In this podcast episode, joining me is the one of the most eminent and prominent industry leader of the IT industry and API space, Mrs. Marjukka Niinioja, who happens to be the founding partner of the company Osaango, and she's based out of Finland, Helsinki. So, Marjukka, it gives me an absolute and supreme pleasure to welcome you to this podcast initiative of mine. So, Marjukka, how are you doing, and how is the situation in Finland going on right now in Helsinki, if I'm not wrong?
So, hey, thank you so much for inviting me. And it was a very nice introduction. I'm trying to live up to that. But yeah, everything is going really fine here in and around Helsinki, Finland. It's not even too cold right now, and the IT industry is like, well, could be better, but getting there. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's brilliant, Marjukka. So, at the stroke of this hour, which is 6, 7 p.m. Melbourne time, let's kick off with the podcast episode. All right, then. Perfect. So, Marjukka, can you give me and our listeners a complete timeline of your journey in the IT industry?
Well, yeah, even though I'm 25 years old still, I have quite a lot of experience because I started from the first year of university working in the IT industry. So, Mr. Forestry and Agriculture in Finland, in the information center of it, and we were building the agriculture benefit systems for the whole of Finland and all the farmers and everybody else. And then we kind of invented service-oriented architecture, even though it actually was invented at the same time in the US, and we didn't even know. We were just looking at, like, we were university students in a basement, basically, and everybody was just trying to figure out how to build web services and digital applications, and it was really new at the time. And then I did 10 years in various roles, business unit management and project and architecture there. And then I was a couple of years, I was a training manager for IT students. And then I was working 8 years in a startup or scale up, or how would you describe it? But anyway, a SaaS ERP company
Mhm.
globally. And then a then I went into a retail company to set up their APIs. So in the kind of SaaS company, we kind of accidentally started building APIs. I
Okay.
wasn't only doing APIs, but that started to become a big deal at the time.
Mhm.
And then I went to the big retail company to set up their API management and with the way of working around APIs. And then I went to a digital consulting company to kind of strategically get them involved more in the API scene. And then 8 years now, almost in my own company Osaango, where we
Mhm.
consult globally clients on APIs and related things. Let's say it's.
Awesome. Awesome. So, I mean, I will ask you more about your company Osango in a bit. But I wanted to understand when you were a university student, like what was your immediate reaction when you came across the term as web services? Like, what was the immediate, a push for that?
It was actually quite interesting because at the time I was studying education and I was taken in as the kind of uh, let's get the competencies ready for this whole new digital platform and digital ecosystem thinking. And it was super new then, and especially in the government. And no one knew what the heck they were doing. And it was more like skill building. And uh, but I found it really interesting as a concept. It was very humanistic concept in a way that, you connect different systems to each other, and you kind of like there was this interoperability and semantic data, and all that was like super cool back then. And so what I organized then people to do was that we kind of organized ourselves into research projects. So we had these immense problems to tackle: how to get all the farmers, all the farming software companies, all the different government sectors, and everybody else to kind of share data with each other and connect in a kind of secure way. And so, because the tech was so new, no one really knew it. So it made sense that we kind of did it as a research project. And I think that was really fundamental for my career actually after that, because I kind of used that same way of thinking that, hey, let's think that we don't know anything about this, and let's assume we have to do some research and base our things into kind of real facts and experiments, instead of just, saying that, hey, we know everything and, this is how it is. So that was actually something that we will be talking about my book and everything else. So it's a whole segue to that.
That's good to know, Marjukka. Now, Marjukka, I wanted to understand, like, what was your inspiration and backstory that was associated, with founding your company, Osaango?
Well, yeah, it was actually all the work that I had done in the SaaS company, in the retail company, of course, in the public sector around APIs, was kind of like, okay, in the retail company, we had done this whole thing about 30 vendor teams and everybody doing APIs a bit differently, and how can we publish them in API management? And it was a whole jungle, but somehow we managed to do it. And then when I went to the digital consultancy and I was supposed to tell everybody else there how can we make our clients do this, and also the clients how to tell them how is the best practice to do APIs. So then that kind of translated itself into a method, and we sold that method, and the first customer, big Finnish global customer, said we need to do this as open source. And then after a while there was all kind of intrigue over trademarks and IPR and everything else, but then we figured out, okay, the best course of action is to put this method into another company, aka my company, with a co-founder, and to just distribute it as a kind of global open method. But it all went down so that I knew 1 week before that I was even going to set up a company suddenly and start as an entrepreneur. And at the same time, I was like, hey, you need to go to France to speak to your couple of hundred closest friends around this. And then I went to API Days Paris, and I presented this method, which was really, really raw at the time. And I presented it. I was like, hey, I'm just, a girl from Finland. This is maybe something interesting for you. And then I had this whole lineup of serious, French government and whatever different big companies lined up. Seriously, they were lining up after the talk. And I was like, okay, maybe there is something here. Maybe we just, maybe this is worth, setting up a company and doing this.
So when you set up your company, Osaango, did you get that high that, wow, I've, climbed that stairway of success? Or did you feel that, there is a nervous feeling kind of a thing, but will I be able to, cope up with that? Did you have, that pride moment and nervousness at the same time?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Actually, I had planned 8 years old before that I would actually like to set up a company, and I had set up a kind of a private, a company, well, like this, not a private limited company, but like a more freelancer kind of company a year before because of other things. But I honestly didn't have time to think. It was so fast. There was a lot of things going on, a lot of legal stuff, a lot of collaboration stuff, everything. So I didn't have time to think, and but I was kind of already mentally prepared to that. And I was finally kind of in a career, financial, family situation where I actually was able to do that. So that's why it wasn't a bad thing. My co-founder, though, suddenly heard in the very first weeks of the whole thing that his wife is going to suddenly have the sixth and seventh kid in the family. And then we had to make some other plans because that was not a feasible solution. So things happen when you start entrepreneurship.
Exactly. I mean, there are a lot of, cumbersomes. I mean, let's say a lot of issues that rise up, but once you, pick it up, I mean, you feel like, wow, I
but
made it
I was,
really big.
but I was happily in the situation where my former, or the current employer, the digital consultancy, was actually seeing the mutual benefit of setting up the company, and they even said they wanted to come as a kind of 50% partner. I said no, because it actually doesn't fit this model. But we then agreed for collaboration, and also I got the first projects from them. So it was a kind of a safe way to start.
That's brilliant, Marjukka. I mean, that gives me a complete idea about how hard you have worked to get your company, and I really wish you a lot of success with respect to Osaango. Now, I wanted to understand, like, how would you like to familiarize me and our listeners with your deep expertise in API and data economy pertaining to these places like the manufacturing industry, the traffic industry, the forest industry, energy industry, and finally the construction industry. It's like a huge list. So how did you dabble between all of that?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because those were the industries I worked with in these different companies that I was working, but also at Osaango. Those were the first kind of companies that we worked with, and that is kind of logical because those industries form up the biggest part of the Nordics, Finnish and the whole Nordics kind of industry. And the interesting thing, of course, there was that a lot of the kind of things are hardware and software related, and a lot of those companies were actually selling completely something else than anything digital or even data, and suddenly they are having in their hands hey, we are not just selling cranes, or we are not just selling elevators, or we are not just selling a construction project. We are also thinking of the customers are interested in the data related to that, in the kind of maintenance and the whole life cycle of those products and services. And actually, there was a big move to kind of what the researchers are calling servitization. So instead of you buying an elevator or crane, you are buying a service. You're buying elevators as a service, and the kind of maintenance contract also can include the data, for example. But those industries are interesting in the sense that you can't just think about the APIs without thinking the industry standards, the ecosystem, how these are used, who is actually whose customer and whose partner, what are the relationships there, so who can have access to whose data. Interestingly, also the kind of one of the first projects I was involved with in Osaango was that we got this sudden ask from the Ministry of Transportation, or the kind of organization under it, that, hey, there's this new legislation coming in. There was a bright idea that, hey, let's copy paste the open banking legislation from Europe to a domestic legislation on transportation. And the legislation was basically forcing or requiring everybody from planes to taxis to trains to buses to kind of open up APIs to each other. And of course, they had a whole panic over this. The legislators didn't really know what they were doing, but also the companies were like, oh my God, this is going to kind of screw up our business model. How do we even technically do this? And what's the funding and everything else? So I had these kind of interesting situations with 30 lawyers, 30 engineers, 30 business managers being very involved from different companies. But, it all turned out good, and now we can, buy airplane tickets with the train tickets, even to Germany, if you want to, because of that legislation.
I got the point. Yeah, that completely explains. But now, since I'm based in Australia, and I have that Indian heritage in me, but I'm not very familiar with the term of the forest industry. So how is API and forest industry linked together? I'm like, what is the use
That
case
is an
behind that?
interesting question. Yeah, I have to say that more recently, I've worked with Australian finance sector too, so that is kind of more in my mind. But yeah, we've done quite a lot of interesting kind of innovation projects, but also kind of helping out with the architectural things and business models on. Let's say you have smart forest machines. So basically, you are doing harvesting. Like instead of humans doing all the sowing and, and things like that, cutting wood and transporting it out, you actually have almost like robots or smart kind of tractor-like machines that are going there, and they know a lot of the forest and a lot of the work that they do. Those machines, they collect data. They also are kind of connecting with satellites and with GPS and everything to the kind of map information, the geo information around it. But they also kind of can tell that if there's a kind of how many tons of wood they have collected, if there's a problem in the machine, or a lot of other things that you wouldn't think of. And they also can communicate with each other.
Okay.
So then if you want to know, like also in the farming industry, especially in Finland, because we've been doing this for a long time, there's a lot of data being collected around the soil and like in the forest too, but in farming about the soil and everything else, like the conditions, weather conditions and everything. And you can use then that data to predict things and see what can be done where and what should we do with this forest to make the optimal, if we are trying to make it to paper or something else, what is the
Okay.
optimal time to collect it? So a lot of things. And APIs are,
Wow.
of course, connecting that all to the enterprise systems, to the data storages and
Yeah.
partnerships.
That's a beautiful insight, Marjukka. Now I just completely understand like how the worlds of the forest industry and API is completely linked together. Now, having said that, I have come to know that you are participating in a lot of conferences. Now, if you would like to explain it to our listeners about your stint, speaking at different conferences and also gaining the title of the mother of the lean, open, and that business oriented API ops cycles, how would you explain that?
Yeah, so, well, conferences is one thing, and I've been organizing them, I've been participating in them, speaking them in them a lot of times. That would be a whole nother, conversation, but maybe about the open APIOps Cycles method. That was actually something, like I mentioned, in the digital consultancy where I had to kind of get people to understand how they should collaborate, how they should do API governance, and what kind of methods and models they could apply in their companies. And the first customer then said that, hey, we really like this, but we are working in a multi-vendor environment. This needs to be openly licensed, otherwise we can't use it. And that was kind of the starting point of publishing the APIOps Cycles method as an open licensing. And in the first round, it was just a bunch of canvases, some instructions, not that much and not even that good, but for some reason it kind of took off, as I said, in APIs Paris. And then after that, there has been quite a lot of like interest for it in like all of the world, in all continents, and that's actually an interesting thing. Like I accidentally heard something that in Brazil and in Australia, some big companies are using it, and I saw that in some conference videos in conferences I haven't even been to myself. So that was an interesting thing. But yeah, the kind of APIOps cycles is like why the mother of that method is more like, yes, I was like the one giving birth to it, but then of course there have been quite a lot of people who have used it and contributed to it and are partnering with it. So in that sense, it's kind of like I'm just trying to take care of the baby and let it grow in the world. So, but now this summer, I really kind of feel like I gave birth to it because I finally had time and I had input from all the conferences, all the clients, all the partners to really like what are they expecting to have in it. And we actually were able to publish a some 100 pages of the method openly and organize it better. And it's also translated into 5 languages at the moment. And it's quite easy to kind of contribute more translations if needed.
That's brilliant. Now, when we talk about translations, why do you think that, translating everything is required? Like for the local businesses or people who are based in, let's say the countryside, are they using it, or like is it just for the other
So
reason?
there are markets where, like let's say German market, uh, it is a very German speaking market. Also Brazilians, they used to, I don't know what they do now, but they used to translate. Even when I was in the SaaS company, they used Google Translate to translate our user interface. So we were very surprised when they sent us Brazilian screenshots of our system, which we hadn't localized. But anyway, there is a huge need. French are the same. Some of the Finns are the same. So they want to use it in their local language. And actually with APIs, I was just talking about this with Claire Barron and Kim Lane yesterday, that what I've seen this week in my and previously in my life is that APIs, like the technical side of APIs, is not so difficult. But when you have a complex industry, complex regulations, complex system where that API belongs to, oftentimes you actually have the documentation of the API or the documentation of the product, the system, in the local language, or something related to that in the local language. And that is a problem for the poor developers who expect, hey, I have an API, it's probably easy to use. I remember when I had to kind of suddenly use a Russian API back in the day, and they had provided me a Google translated version, which was actually like, I didn't know if it was for a nuclear power plant or a CRM. It was so bad. And I do speak or like understand like quite many languages enough to kind of make some sense of the local language. So I managed to do it then when I got access to, and right now we have, for example, some Swedish and other APIs where we have multinational teams, and it's really difficult if you don't understand Swedish to make any sense out of it. So actually what I would say is that I've noticed that, yes, some of the things, when they are new to you, you haven't used to think about that. Like, for example, the APIOps Cycles method, yes, there's technical stuff in it, but actually the big new thing about it is the product thinking, the business and tech together, and the collaborative way of doing things. And this is so new thing for many people that if they don't see it in their own language, it does not necessarily make sense to them, if even then, without explanations, but otherwise, yeah.
That's pretty much interesting. And now, I mean, now I understand like what is the reason behind it. Since you have the stint of, since you have that experience of speaking in different conferences, out of all the conferences that you had a public speaking stint at, like which conference did you feel was the, the memorable one, like that has always stood out for you the most?
I mean, it's for different reasons, different conferences. I mean, like a lot of the conference, like API conferences have been always really great. Nordic APIs conference were the ones that I started with. So it was kind of like there's a soft spot in me for that. Then, of course, there have been non-API conferences, a lot of them, where sometimes I feel like, if I need to talk about APIs in a non-API conference, that is always kind of a bit scary thing, because you never know what the audience knows or doesn't know, or
Yeah,
where is the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I have to say one interesting one was very first big conference. It was actually an IBM organized conference when I was in the retail company, and I had just been, I was coming from a small company into this super big retail company, and my boss was very known in the like a leading CIO kind of type, and in the media and everything. And suddenly he goes away, switches company, and he says to IBM, "Hey, Marjukka can pick up, my speaking slot in your big conference." And I was like, "Oh, nice." And then, we were very much starting the API journey at the time, and then there I was in the big, conference, in the big stage, speaking to 2,000 of my closest friends on our API strategy, which wasn't even decided yet in the management. And so then I go to the stage and prepare for my speak, and the then CEO of Finland in IBM is starting to tell jokes about situations where people have been actually fainting before, like during their
What?
talk on the stage or something. I was like, please keep telling me more.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow, that's
So
a pretty
memorable
funny anecdote.
conferences.
Nice, nice. Every conference, has some kind of a memorable story or, a funny anecdote that's, linked to it,
Yeah.
I would say. That's good to know, Marjukka. Now, Marjukka, any insight that you would like to, provide with respect to, being the co-author of the book API Economy 101?
Yeah, I would say that the reason why we were kind of wrote that book originally, and this is tied to the do we need translations and a lot of other things that we've talked about, but we actually originally wrote it in Finnish. That's like one thing. So we were like, okay, there are enough English, tech books out there. We want the Finnish audience. We want to kind of educate Finland. That was the first door. And why did we want to do that was that we saw a lot of industry kind of like vendor related marketing materials on API economy, and a lot of it was kind of like hyping at the time. This was 2018. And a lot of the developers and IT managers and everybody else were like saying that we don't believe APIs are a business thing at all. And everybody had their opinions, but nobody had really facts. And we want to combine research.
Yeah.
There was a professor and doctor and everything else, involved in the whole kind of writing process. And me as a kind of like, yes, I've studied computer science too, but like as a humanist, we were rigorous about our source material and references and concepts and vocabulary that we were using. So not so in computer science research,
Yep.
unfortunately.
Mhm.
But what we did was that we wanted to kind of prove that these are not just somebody said something and you should believe it because of that. There's actual scientific research and there are actual kind of experiences from real customer cases and organizations how this whole thing works. And so we wanted to put also this transportation and all these different industry examples and combine this kind of as a business meets tech book, because that was also what we saw, that business and tech were like too separated. And the minute you started talking about APIs, even if the next word was economy, you already scared away all the business people and
Yeah,
you didn't get the right kind of conversations. So
exactly.
then after we wrote it in Finnish first and got it published, we actually then got feedback that, hey, everybody else wants to read it too. So let's translate it into English. And we actually got sponsors to fund that. And then even this year, we thought already, we forgot it and we thought that it was already old news until like last year, there was actually much more renewed interest to it. And even from Silicon Valley, they called me up and said, hey, our management is just reading this book. This is awesome, but how the hell did you actually manage to write this in Finland? Like, this is kind of stuff that we usually have in Silicon Valley. And I was like, interesting question. So, yeah.
Right. So when the people from Silicon Valley reached out to you and they called you that, a lot of things are relatable for us. What was the relatability factor that they were talking with respect to the book that you have written
Yeah,
in
it
English?
was, interestingly enough, it was the kind of uh, ecosystem journeys and the kind of like idea that you really can build ecosystems, partnerships with different industries and kind of like, uh, for example, that transportation story, that's just one of them. There are like energy and other kind of utilities and other stories that are not like, I think that was kind of one of the things for the Silicon Valley guys that, they're used to having those like payment systems and,
Hmm.
data platforms and everything else there, but the kind of having the kind of real world industries and the heavy duty industries and legislation. Of course, in Europe, we have quite a lot of like this kind of ecosystem supporting legislation. I know in other, like globally in other areas there are too. And I think that was kind of one thing that was interesting to them. But I think the biggest thing for them, as it is when I talk about APIOps Cycles method, for example, with new people, the one thing that surprises them the most is that, hey, you should think about your customer journeys, for example, first before you start thinking which APIs support them, and how, like, to kind of really rethink the design process, the design thinking process when you are starting to do digital experiences. Like, UIs are nice, apps are cool, but actually the users do not want to use any apps or any UIs. They just want things to happen. And that's
Yeah.
where, and kind of API, kind of customer journey first, but then APIs second approach can really make a difference.
Yep, yep. That completely, sums up the point for me. Now,
Mm.
Marjukka, I just wanted to understand, would you like to, shed some spotlight, with respect to, providing these, open, university courses and let's say remote courses pertaining to the data and API economy, as well as even providing courses on the lines of KONE and,
Mm.
Cisco Solutions as well.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. At the same time, when we wrote the book, we realized that, okay, there aren't actually any, like, that's why we are not seeing these kind of API skills in people, but also that's why we are not getting API economy right oftentimes, because this is not something that is taught in any school or university. You have business schools, you have tech schools, and those do not meet. And when we started talking with different professors around the world and stuff, we realized that, okay, this is not something we have available. So let's build something. So we had first a Finnish university partnering up with us to do this kind of introduction to API economy course. And then and then later we did it with another university, this data economy course, and some further things. But then I saw suddenly that KONE was actually looking to educate their partners and customers on APIs, because that was supporting their strategic initiatives. And KONE is a big global elevator and people flow company. But then I kind of connected with them and I said, look, we might have mutual interests. What if we did some joint things on this course? And they said, yes, actually, we want to go to German and Chinese markets with this, and let's localize the course for those markets. And that was an interesting first job for my new marketing assistant at the time to get that done. But yeah, that was really successful. We had different, universities, companies from different countries. We had university from France. A lot of students from there were taking the course. We had Nigerian digitalization consultancy put all their employees to do the course and so forth. Then with the Futudemy, we kind of took things a bit further. So we wanted to do a more hands-on version, more innovative version of the course. So we talked with Cisco Solution, the Nordics, and then a Finnish university, and we were like, okay, you can do service design, you can do design thinking, and you can kind of like try to sell API tech to people. But if the designers don't know anything about APIs, and if the kind of customers don't know what they would use APIs for and how to build these ecosystems, then nobody has game in this play. So basically, we then experimented first, and then we kind of launched it. And we had this Futudemy course where we ran these kind of innovation workshops around design thinking, but also using the APIOps Cycles method. And the coolest thing was that you could say that the less the people who participated knew about APIs, the more creative they actually were in coming up with really interesting solutions. So yeah.
That's interesting, Marjukka. Now, Marjukka, what were the names of the universities that were part of this, in this program?
So the organizing universities were Tampere University of Technology, or like now it's Tampere University only, and then Laurea University of Applied Sciences. So those are based in Finland. But then we had like their networks, they have kind of global networks of collaboration universities that I can't list all of them now, they're on their websites, but they were kind of able to put this into their curriculum. Now these courses have, one of them is still running, one has been changed in change of curriculum, but we had, I think, 4,000 students run through just one of those courses, and then more with the others. So yeah, around the world. So that was quite exciting.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's a very good insight, about, encouraging the universities and providing, university courses for, for them with respect to the API side, which is really a
Yeah, and
very interesting one. Yeah.
yeah, and I would love to kind of keep doing that, but what we realized was that it needed quite a lot of thinking and even administrative changes sometimes from the universities, because they were not necessarily used to collaborating with a company in the first place, and the topic was so cross kind of kind of this, how do you say it in English, but the idea is that you had like business, service design, tech kind of things in it, and with the future demi we even had like people from healthcare, social studies, building management, around the kind of different like retail and everything. So it was so kind of a big effort for them sometimes to kind of get their heads around it, that they could even do this kind of course. Because one of the biggest things was that took most time was that, where do we put this in the curriculum? Like, who is in charge of this course?
Yeah.
Because like, do we put it into computer science, and the computer science department says, we don't understand what the heck this is, because this is not coding. And the business side says that, but this sounds like tech, this is not business. So you have all these things where if we are looking at the real world right now and the requirements set by the work environment, you need to have these kind of different skills to survive and thrive.
Brilliant. Brilliant, Marjukka. Now, Marjukka, I mean, you just tried your hand at the Finnish universities. Do you have a plan of, venturing out, towards the other Nordic countries like Denmark, Sweden, or let's say Norway for that matter, given an opportunity?
Well, let's put it this way. There is a plan in place, but of course, we've already done stuff in like Nordics and in different countries of Europe. I just came back from Germany and France and stuff, and even with Australia, with our partners and so forth. So and sometimes something in US, sometimes something for Asia and so forth. So I would say that as a kind of strategic approach, yes, there is a plan in place to kind of start covering more ground with the APIOps cycles and the APIOps community and so forth, like more systematically. I think the world is ready for that. But yeah, as otherwise, I would say I'm interested in different parts of the world in this sense. That, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, sky is the limit, and you'll definitely reach there one day, covering the entire globe.
Yeah, actually, fun fact was that our first year of business, we got mentioned in an Indian-based market research, like a global market research, with 20 of the world's biggest API-related companies. And it was kind of funny because it was like IBM, Salesforce, Google, and Broadcom, and a bunch of those big guys. And then there was Osaango in the 20 companies. I saw it, I was like, okay, interesting. What the hell just happened? So,
I mean, for a moment you didn't believe, right? Is it real? Or something else is there in that list?
Yeah, exactly. It was actually one of our partners that spotted it. I was like, what is going on? Anyway.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Marjukka. Now, Marjukka, as an expert of API, I just wanted to understand, like, what is your take on the API, let's say, API data economy, and, the API product management, and finally, the main thing, the API architecture?
Well, I would say there's a lot of hype going on, or some reality, but a lot of hype. going on with like MCP, AI-driven integrations, AI-driven API design, and some companies, I have personally been involved with those companies. Some companies are able to, with a lot of help, to achieve something sensible on that ground. But most companies don't have the skill sets yet. They don't have really a good business reason for that. And their expectations might be a little bit high and non-realistic. It's also that a lot of the vendors are creating a lot of hype, and then it's kind of like this cycle of like what is reality and what is not. But I would say that in the real world, I am seeing so many super bad, unmanaged, undocumented, or badly or limited documentation APIs that it's not even funny. Like this week only, with one customer situation, I've been involved with like 20 different systems from different companies and their APIs, and the poor integrators and developers and me are trying to make sense of all of them, and they all work differently. They're documented in different ways. Their performance is all over the place, and it's kind of like the whole thing is. I mean, I'm not saying that everything is a mess. There are lots of good APIs out there, but I would say that most people, most organizations don't even yet know if their API is good enough or not. And this is the problem. So they don't understand how much time and effort architects and developers are actually needing to use to consume their APIs.
That completely gives me an idea on that. Now I'll add one more point to this particular question which I just asked. I'll ask, what is your take even on the API economy consulting? How would you try to put it across?
I would say that a lot of effort, like you were asking about the API architecture, okay?
Yep.
So a lot of effort is going to the architecture discussions, like what is the best way of doing APIs, securing APIs, building APIs. And that is also important, but actually that question is a very easy thing to answer once you know why these APIs should exist and what's the business reason and who's going to consume them and why, what are their expectations. And this is the discussion that does not get necessarily enough bandwidth to happen, but that's the API economy discussion. It's also about kind of where do you want to go strategically on things? Who do you want to partner with? Who do you want to sell? What kind of experiences do you want to offer? And all of that is actually very, very related to APIs. So that should happen first or in connection in a kind of feedback loop with how do we build those APIs, and then how do we govern them? How do we collaborate on them? A lot of people who need to work with APIs or participate in these conversations don't have a clue on what APIs are and on the technical side, and still their input is very valuable to this. So even if they're working in retail banking, or like today there was an HR team trying to discuss the integration to another system, and suddenly they had to learn what the hell are webhooks. So you have a lot of different people involved in this, and that's kind of one of the reasons, back again to the APIOps Cycles method, like no matter if you use it or not, but the collaboration, the language, the ways of working should support it, that you can take input and also give a kind of your input as a tech person to those discussions.
Right. Now, suppose, you just have met a company and that company's API system is, not in a good state. So how would you like to, advocate them? Do you provide them a proper training kind of a thing, or do you, give them a, let's say a roadmap that this is the way you can improve your APIs?
So I would love to educate them. They don't always want to be educated. That is another thing. But I would love to start with a little bit of education, because again, trying to get that same ground and same understanding, and so, because it's not just education, it's also kind of gaining trust mutually. Like, are we talking about the same thing, different thing? Does this person know what they're doing, and kind of what's our take on it? So that would be a nice start. Typically, a lot of times we get to do that. And then the other thing is that you said, do you give them a roadmap? Well, sort of. I might show them a kind of, this is what a roadmap could look like, but then it really needs to be collaboratively created. And hopefully with some of the business minded people too, like, where is this industry, where is this tech, where is this feature, where is this product service going to, so that then you know what kind of tech, what kind of APIs, what kind of architectural decisions you need to know, and how much to put effort. Like, okay, things could be really bad, or they could be like slightly bad, but the question is, how much effort should you put into certain areas to fix things so that, you know, it makes sense from a business point of view. So a lot of times, actually, yes, for example, personally, I do give advice on architecture, and I do give advice on kind of the DevOps side of APIs, APIOps, and even sometimes the coding side of things, but that's not really like the point why I would need to get involved. It's more like we try to fix the people and the collaboration between the people to kind of keep the company supported so that they can continue without us and thrive on that. So that's kind of the way I approach things.
That's a beautiful insight on that, Marjukka. So, Marjukka, before we, actually, put a closer, let's say, conclude our podcast session, let's take a lighter route. All this while, I was, just bombarding you with the questions about your journey, about, the backstory that's related to your company, Osaango, and about a lot of nuances of API. But now I'm going to take a very lighter approach, asking about your likes and interest in the form of a rapid fire round.
Fine.
All right, perfect then. So, Marjukka, what is your favorite hobby?
Oh, my favorite hobby would be traveling, if I just had enough time. But right now, I kind of managed to combine this kind of business interrailing through Europe. So combining work and the kind of pleasure of traveling with trains around the Europe. So that was fun.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Now, if someone, like, suppose if my listeners want to know something about Finland, I mean, I have visited Finland myself. I have visited Helsinki, and suppose if I want to, visit Finland to the most, what is that place that you would like to, suggest other than Helsinki?
Oh, that is also easy. I mean, there are so many places, of course, but actually, physically, I'm right now sitting in a village called Ryttylä, 80 kilometers from Helsinki, and this is like I would not say this is a place in the middle of nowhere, but this is a kind of rural village, but next to a railway station, and you have like really good connections to visit all the big cities and all the kind of historical sites and also like sports event and cultural events from here. And why I'm mentioning this is that my son has been playing Arma from like teenager, and now he's an adult, and he has actually invited all his friends over multiple times, and now they're all always like, we can come again to Ryttylä, from different countries. So there must be something in here. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's nice. That's very good to know. Now, what was the last book that you have read?
I think I mean, honestly, with this kind of company running and cultures and everything, I have had very little time, too little time to read anything. But I did read, I think, like, well, mainly professional books, honestly, at this moment. I love reading history and everything else, but don't have time to do it. I don't remember what the book was called, but it was about API product analytics. And I think that was quite interesting. I think that honestly, a lot of times, a lot of kind of problems between people and organizations can be actually solved by data, like providing data, looking at the data, what's really going on, what's really happening, and especially from the kind of product thinking side. I think that was interesting.
Amazing. Now, I mean, since I'm Indian and I'm, I want to understand, like, what is your favorite Indian dish? Then what would you name that to be?
Actually, interesting question. I do love like any Indian food that I've eaten has been
Oh,
pretty much
okay.
good. But I love the vegetable foods, like anything with like lentils and spiced rice and everything else. I don't know. Of course, also meat food is good. I don't know.
Yeah.
Chicken korma is probably like a classic about. But I mean, it's also an interesting question in the way that yes, we have quite a lot of Indian food here in Finland right now, but because Finnish food is very not so spiced up
Hmm.
food. Like we really have limited amount of spices in use in Finland, like in our normal food. It's kind of like the Indian versions of food here are probably like 10% of the spiciness that they are in some other parts of the world. So yeah, a bit different
Trust me.
story, but
Yeah.
love the
Yeah.
vegetable foods.
That's very good to hear. I'm really happy hearing that, you really
Mm,
like some Indian food,
mm,
especially lentils, as you talked about. We call it as
yeah,
dal. Dal is the
yeah,
way we
yeah,
locals call
yeah,
it.
I know, yeah, yeah. But I think that's something that we don't use in our food here, but it's just so like good in the Indian kind of version of it. So yeah.
The way you were just telling that, in Finland, they make the food according to the taste buds of, of the Finnish people. In Australia, it's no different. The
Mm,
food is not spicy here. It's pretty normal.
mhm,
Some restaurants are very authentic. Some are literally not authentic. So that's the
yeah.
same problem here. But yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I have to say that because I'm actually half Cypriot. My dad is from Cyprus, which is also a very Australian thing, but there
Yeah,
are a
yeah,
lot of Cypriots
absolutely.
and Greeks there. Yeah,
Many.
but for Indian food especially, I think I find it very kind of similar in the sense that you have a lot of yogurt and yogurt
Hmm.
sources and like very kind of similar dishes than you would find in the Greek and especially in the Cypriot version, which is very different to the mainland Greek.
Yep.
I think that's kind of the thing for me, that if I can't get a decent Greek meal or Cypriot meal, then the next best thing is Lebanese, and then Indian is really good
Indian
as
food.
a third. Yeah.
That's a very unique choice. That's good to know. Suppose, in my listeners, if someone wants to learn a little bit of Finnish, what is that famous Finnish word that you would like to teach them?
Okay, so there is a famous Finnish word that everybody teaches to all foreigners, which I am not going to teach because it's a bad word. But you can hear it everywhere where people have had Finnish contact. But I would say that uh, I will go with hyvää huomenta, which means good
Okay.
morning. And I'll just say it because it's so difficult to say, so hyvää huomenta. But that was also
Uva
the
momenta.
opening line when I went to my first ever meeting with the Australian client and I opened Teams. And the first, like, I didn't yet see anybody, the connection was forming. And I just heard hyvää huomenta from the other side. And I was like,
Whoa.
what is going on? Did I accidentally start the wrong meeting? And it was just a friendly Australian clients who had learned this, phrase. So
That was
I'll
very
go with
sweet of
that.
them.
Yeah.
Truly. So it's Huba Momenta, right? If I'm just
Yeah.
getting that right. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. So the final question to you in this rapid fire round, Mayuka. Who is your favorite musical artist of all time? Then who would you name that be?
I honestly, I listen so much different kinds of music that I don't really have a favorite artist, but I do, this is embarrassing, but this is like if I'm really stressed out and I really need to focus on the work and everything is messed up, it's like Jennifer Lopez from
Huh.
YouTube because and there's no other reason, but it has this good rhythm that keeps you focused and
Yeah, yeah.
and makes you brighten up. So that's the only reason for that.
That's a very interesting choice. Yeah, she's a very good, pop singer again. And yeah,
Yeah, but like yes, but that doesn't have anything to do with it.
No. I mean, that's not at all a problem.
Yeah,
Everyone
yeah,
likes a
yeah,
different genre of music, and
yeah.
it depends on each time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Bollywood kind of these movie songs are also pretty nice sometimes.
Bollywood
So
songs, really.
yeah.
May I ask you, like, which Bollywood song did you hear the most? Or let's say,
Uh,
what is the most thing famous
it's
in
just
Finland?
it's from the movies, like whatever is has been in Netflix, from the Bollywood movies. That would be like I don't remember the names of them, but there are
Okay.
some that are kind of catchy. So yeah, my
Yeah, they I
secret
can.
hobby when I can't travel, and especially during COVID, I always watched everything from Netflix that was outside of Europe or US because I just
Oh,
like. I mean, I just wanted to kind of travel abroad. That's
yeah.
kind of from the way that I do it. So yeah,
I
ended
believe you
up watching
traveled
a lot of.
abroad digitally. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously,
Brilliant.
I don't assume that India looks like in those movies, but
Not at
yeah.
all. Not at all. All right then, Marjukka, it was such a pleasure having you in this podcast session of mine. It was once again an absolute pleasure collaborating with you. And finally, thank you so much from taking time from your busy schedule. And one thing I really appreciate, Marjukka, even having a go live session, you were part of this podcast initiative of mine. Really means a lot. So I wish you all the best for your future endeavors, and it was an absolute pleasure once again collaborating with you.
Thank you so much for having me. Okay.
All, all right, listeners, this is your host, Akhil Navluri, signing off. We would be back with another podcast episode with another eminent industry leader very soon. Till then, keep listening. Goodbye. Stay tuned. Thank you and au revoir. Thank you.